A warmest possible welcome and greetings of the season. And we do hope you are full of the spirit of spring. This I say not only on my own behalf, but our President, Dr. Uma Dasgupta, and our Vice President, Dr. Krishna Sen. There is really no way in how I can convey the immense honor that all of you are here. Of course, the participants, but equally and perhaps even more, the others, the poetry lovers and poets who are here only to listen to us, here as a member of Srijan's family. Our President Uma had directed me not to waste time in inviting her to talk, and I will honor that direction and begin our Adda as right away with our anthem. We have a ritual of remembering a great poet born every month. This month, we see that freedom and democratic values are so severely tested. We thought we should also bow down to the Ukrainian poet Taras Shevchenko, a poet who after his death in 1961 had become such a symbol, such an icon and a rallying force. One cannot help wondering whether there was any design in Tagore getting born a couple of months later in 1861. As design indeed it was, how Shevchenko was born, uneducated, abject poverty, living in serfdom, slavery, and then in those conditions, falling in love with or kobzars as they strummed their instruments and sang of ancient Ukraine. Those songs like bowls in Bengal, or even our bard, maybe Tulsidas singing of Rama. But those strumming sounds of the kobza instrument resounded within Shevchenko all his life and erupted into songs and speaking of lost loves and lost liberties and lost lands. Our intention today is to make Shevchenko come alive in our memories so that we have our faith in freedom rekindled. In fact, today's independent Ukraine could not have realized its identity had Shevchenko not been there as the prophet, as the poet who galvanized Ukrainian identity. Of course, his own story, we know, it's reflected in his poetry. Moving from birth as a serf, going towards liberty, and then being exiled to the farthest reaches of the Russian Empire along the Aral Sea, which I believe is drying now, orphaned, and his owner taking the teenage Shevchenko from Ukraine to Warsaw and eventually to St. Petersburg. And there, spotting how talented an artist he was and introducing him to one of Europe's finest painters, Karl Brulov, who was at that time heading the Imperial Academy of Arts, who recognized his talents and who was very sad that he was not free and not able to practice what he should have done. So he auctioned a portrait which he himself had made of, and that was purchased by no less a person than the immediate family of the Tsar. And it is ironical because serfdom was created by the Tsars. And then, of course, Shevchenko had become Bruilov's most favorite student. And soon he had also started writing poetry and publishing them, and especially his extremely interesting poems under the collection of Kobzar. There were some 8 poems first, and then later joined by many more. And today we have a very thick volume of his poetry, a poetry which had galvanized all of Ukraine. But we must not forget his art, which was capturing all of his poetry through colors and forms, sketches and waters and oils and etchings. More than 1,200 of them, and each one a masterpiece, and seeping not just in colors, but the inside of his soul. People say that he was, of course, a stupendous artist, and in that art, it was poetry that spoke. But in his poems, it was the artist that spoke. Such God-given talent, very, very rare, because in our tributes so far, nearly 100 poets all over the world. I think this is the first time we have come across a poet who was a poet, who was a songster, who was an artist, and although he did not have any background of studying, but he did so much. I had prepared a small slideshow for you to sample his art, and I will request Sujata to please share the screen, because you will see that, like Tagore, Shevchenko too was using his poetry as sketching canvases, and like him, he was also drawing figures and scratching out things which he did not like. And I have just shown 2 samples for you. You can see the interesting way in which Shevchenko was writing his poems. Very beautiful handwriting. We also want to then show you some sketches, the portraits he had been commissioned for, and which adorn most venerated of walls, a number of museums, and are very highly valued in international art market. And especially the portraits which he had made of all these ladies and high-ups who had become very useful for him. A portrait of which two people, and they had been very useful in securing his release later, especially the Fyodor Tolstoy, who was very, very, very closely related to Fyodor Tolstoy, and they effected his release. Also, his nudes, and you will see that in the style of European art, he had been practicing drawing nudes, and he also sketched himself in portraits, self-portraits. The first portrait is of him in 1830, and then he quite lavished at least 100 portraits of his own in that collection of 1,200. And next slide, please. And of course, all these emotional, social circumstances which he was able to capture is just absolutely prodigious. He was hired by the Tsar's archaeological places where he recorded various buildings, and it's impossible to show a sample, but I go to his poems now briefly, and the first poem was written is from the Corsair at the end of September, December, and you have this painting of a sky washed, unwashed skies, and the paint and the poem goes, the sky is unwashed, the waves are spent, and reeds devoid of wind still sway much like a drunkard all along the shore. Oh, my dear Lord, along his useless sea and in the open jail, silent in the yellow grass, which sways amid the steppe as if I were alive. It does not wish to speak the truth, and there is no one to ask. A painting which depicts all this was a very treasured painting of his, which we also had shared in our invitation. Next, please. The next poem is also which talks about days of youth have passed, cold winds buffet hope, winter in a chilly home, you sit alone with no one for a quiet chat. And it goes on and it ends with, so free your thoughts of freedom, sit and don't await a thing. All his life, he was writing poetry on this. And mm, uh, ultimately, we will go to his a small clip in which he wanted that he be buried on a mount from which he could see the Dnieper River and the mountains all side of him. And that wish was fulfilled by the Ukrainians in his 200th year, and he now lies buried there. This poem is called The Testament, and there will be this music which is going on. This music has the qabza also, but that is just behind, and the words are so beautiful. When I am dead, bury me in my beloved Ukraine, so that the fields, the boundless steppes, the Dnieper's plunging shore, my eyes could see, my ears could hear the mighty river roar. Oh, bury me, then rise ye up and break your heavy chains and water with the tyrant's blood the freedom you have gained. And in the great new family, the family of the free, with softly spoken, kindly word, remember also me. The whole world has had celebrated his 200th anniversary. This video was also made when that anniversary was being celebrated. So, with this, we do think that if art and artists like this are born and inspired, then freedom does have a chance. And whatever happens, we do hope that blessing of the Almighty will be with us. And soon, some issues which have cropped up will get resolved. I now uh, take you on to tribute to Agyeya and request Priyankar ji to proceed, please. In the meantime, I think you all do know that Agyeya was the admired poet of our favorite Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and that he and Jawaharlal ji had shared the prison at the same time. They were in their late or mid 20s or late 20s at that time, and Nehru had written a foreword to Agyeya's book, which was composed in English originally. Maybe a poem or two was translated into Hindi later. But like many English writings of Tagore, which were done in English first, these poems of Agyeya were also written in English first.
Thank you, Basanta. To restrain myself and to maintain time, I have prepared one PowerPoint presentation. Agyeya has been more of an institution than a mere individual author, and over a period of 4 decades, he has exercised greater influence on the course of Hindi literary development in its different genres. Agyeya was born on March 7th, 1911, in a tent at Kasia, Kushinagar, where his archaeologist father, Hiranand Shastri, was conducting an excavation. आप लोग जानते होंगे कि महात्मा बुद्ध हैं, उनको परिनिर्वाण इसी जगह हुआ था, कुशीनगर में. He spent his childhood in the company of his scholar father, far from the active social contact. This might be the reason behind his reclusive personality. He was a man of few words and conducted himself with great poise and dignity. While doing his MA in Lahore, Agyeya joined underground revolutionary movement and became an active and close associate of Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Sukhdev, and Yashpal, another eminent Hindi novelist. He was arrested in November 1930 and spent next 4 years in jail and under house arrest. In the prison, barely in his 20s, he wrote the first volume of his path-breaking novel, Shekhar Ek Jeevani, Shekhar, a biography. He wrote it in 1941. In 1942, during the Second World War, he joined Indian Army or British Army and was sent to Kohima front as combatant officer. He left the army in 1946. Agyeya edited Sainik from Agra, Vishal Bharat from Calcutta. You all know that Vishal Bharat was Hindi version of Modern India, Modern Review, published by Ramanand Chattopadhyay. He edited Pratik and Naya Pratik from Allahabad and New Delhi. In English, he edited Vak. He also served as an editor of Jayaprakash Narayan's Everyman's Weekly and as editor-in-chief of Hindi daily Navbharat Times. Over the decades, his literary stature continued to grow as he left his indelible mark on almost every literary genre. Even in journalism, he excelled as the founder editor of the news weekly Dinman. His imaginative and innovative literary creativity, chartering a distinctly different course from the traditional one, and constant experimentation, both on the plane of content as well as form, is unparalleled. Novelist, short story writer, playwright, essayist, critic, journalist, travelogue writer, stylist, and above all, a poet of variegated experiences of life. In many ways, he was the trendsetter, and the quiet force of his personality made him a natural leader. Agyeya has been the pioneer of Prayogvad and Nayi Kavita movements of modern Hindi poetry. And he edited 4 Saptak anthologies of new poetry. He gave new creative possibilities of poetic diction to Nayi Kavita, thereby giving Hindi poetry a different complexion altogether. Poets of Chayawadi movement did make an impact on Agyeya, yet he is a different poet with a distinctly different makeup. He has a marvelous combination of originality, novelty, and the indomitable will to face new challenges. His contemplative personality has an immense capacity to carve out new ways, discarding outdated tracks in the true fashion of an investigator of new courses. In the introduction to Tar Saptak, he has called himself and his fellow poets of Saptak as Rahon ke Anveshi, advocating novelty over experiment, tradition, and progressiveness. Agyeya edited Tar Saptak in 1943. The preface to Tar Saptak is the most revolutionary document of new writing in Hindi.
I will just add here that Tar Saptak is a collection of poetry. And एक बार समझा दीजिए.
Including 7 poets, 7 Hindi poets. That anthology included 7 Hindi poets, and Agyeya edited that. The points raised in the preface to Tar Saptak have been further discussed in the prefaces to Dusra Saptak, Tisra Saptak, and Chautha Saptak. In the preface to Dusra Saptak, he wrote, "Prayog does not have any theory. We are not theoreticians, nor the experiment is an aim or end in itself. Therefore, to name us Prayogvadi is as meaningful or as meaningless as to call us Kavitavadi." Alongside his poetic excursions of more than 4 decades, both form and content received a constant shape in his poetry. But the freshness of his poetic sensibility, vision of nature's beauty, understanding of human emotions, language of his poetry, symbolization, imagery, rhythm, tone, and meter have all a novelty that has left a deep impact upon modern Hindi poetry. The poet feels he has a responsibility to society, but at the same time, he is a supporter of the freedom of the individual. Therefore, his poetry does not become the protector of individualism. Rather, it supports the value of the freedom of individual. Agyeya penned 15 collections of poetry, 6 books of translations, 12 works of prose, 3 novels, and many collections of short stories. In 1944, he translated Sharat Chandra Chatterjee's novel Shrikant into English. He has translated Rabindranath Thakur's epic novel Gora into Hindi. In 1946, he translated Jainendra Kumar's novel Tyagpatra into English under the title The Resignation. Though Agyeya represents many facets of creativity, he is first and foremost a poet. His main collection of poems are Bhagnadut, Chinta, Ityalam, Indradhanu Ronde Hue, Ari O Karuna Prabhamay, आंगन के पार द्वार, सुनहरे शैवाल, कितनी नावों में कितनी बार, क्योंकि मैं उसे जानता हूँ, सागर मुद्रा, पहले मैं सन्नाटा बुनता हूँ, महावृक्ष के नीचे और अंतिम नदी की बांध पर छाया. ये उनके काव्य संकलन है. लगभग 15 काव्य संकलन अज्ञेय के हैं. Agyeya became a bridge between the old and the new through a meaningful dialogue and communication between tradition and modernity. The essence of his long poem, Asadhya Veena, is a complete dedication to the creativity. His verse play, Uttar Priyadarshi, which is about the redemption of King Ashoka, was first staged in 1966, and later on Ratan Thiyam adapted it to Manipuri. His contribution to novel is no less important than to poetry. His Shekhar Ek Jeevani, written in an autobiographical style, indicates a new beginning in Hindi novel. The story of the gradual revolt of the individual against the oppression of the society, marks a new attitude to life. It is indeed a novel of unique sensibility. His next novel, Nadi Ke Dweep, is again a new experiment. It is an exquisite example of technical perfection of the Hindi novel. Agyeya's literary talent has been amply recognized from time to time by awards and honors. Angan Ke Par Dwar was honored by the Sahitya Academy Award in 1964. For Kitni Naavon Mein Kitni Baar, he got Bharatiya Gyanpith Award in 1978 and Bharat Bharati Samman of Uttar Pradesh Hindi Sansthan in 1983. In addition to this, he has also been honored by Istuga Poetry Evening's Golden Wreath Award for Poetry in 1983. Till his death in 1987, Agyeya remained a dominating presence in the world of Hindi literature. He is considered as one of the greatest literary figures of 20th century Hindi literature. मुझे लगता है कि उनकी छोटी एक दो कविताएं अगर मैं पढ़ूं तो अच्छा रहेगा। और
प्लीज प्रियंका जी एक दो
आप अगर
कविता पढ़िए प्लीज
जी, और आप अगर कुछ उनका अनुवाद पढ़ सके अंग्रेजी में तो और अच्छा रहे।
या तो मैं अंग्रेजी की उनकी जो ओरिजिनल कविता है उनमें से एक आध पढ़ दूं।
आप पढ़िए, आप उसमें से एक दो पढ़िए, तब तक मैं भी एक दो कविताएं निकालता हूँ हिंदी की।
Okay, this I am reading from his prison days, which were written in 1838 onwards. I who am bound, I who am bound, sing joyously of freedom. My shackles keep murmuring, you are whole, you are free. Your bonds are only symbols of your brother's freedom. And you who are free, keep crying in restless fear. We must hold him captive or we will die. Maybe another poem, which is Vision. I looked out through the bars at the blank night, thinking of you, when suddenly a star broke off, shot through the sky in azure and gold, burnt to ashes. A world burnt to ashes while I looked through the bars, thinking of you. Why are bars? Why are you? Why am I? Why are days, months, and years? When in one flash, eternity burns to ashes.
Beautiful.
And towards the end, he goes out of prison and he writes some poetry which was in the 1940s onwards. And one of them is, these are all written in English, and he had been praised, he says in his foreword, is that Gertrude Sen, C.F. Andrews, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, all of them had contributed to popularizing his poems. But this poem is also extremely good. It calls Follow, Follow. This is the way you passed on. I follow your steps, foot on foot, on the dew-laden grass. Trying to hold, not the grass, not the dew, but the touch of your souls with mine. On the emerald green of grass is the pearly veil of dew. Steps make a path that will fade. I tread them over, knowing the while. No, not knowing, but lost in the knowledge that I follow days without end. Efforts without end. A path that you have made in a moment, for a moment in the dew on the grass. But the touch is not true. The path is not true. You are not there before me. It is only endless trying to follow steps on the grass in the dew. Me following you.
मैं जो कविता अभी पढ़ूंगा वो मेरे स्कूल के दिनों से मेरी सबसे प्रिय कविता है, और हिरोशिमा में जो परमाणु बम का विस्फोट हुआ था, ये कविता उसके संदर्भ में अज्ञेय ने लिखी है। हिरोशिमा। एक दिन सहसा सूरज निकला, एक दिन सहसा सूरज निकला, क्षितिज पर नहीं नगर के चौक। धूप बरसी पर अंतरिक्ष से नहीं फटी मिट्टी से। छायाएं मानव जन की दिशाहीन सब ओर पड़ी, वह सूरज नहीं उगा था पूरब से, वह बरसा सहसा बीचों बीच नगर के। काल सूर्य के रथ के पहियों के ज्यों अरे टूटकर बिखर गए हों दसों दिशा में। कुछ क्षण का वह उदय अस्त, केवल एक प्रज्वलित क्षण की दृश्य सोख लेने वाली दोपहरी। फिर छायाएं मानव जन की नहीं मिटी लंबी हो होकर, मानव ही सब भाप हो गए। छायाएं तो अभी लिखी हैं झुलसे हुए पत्थरों पर, उजड़ी सड़कों की गज पर। मानव का रचा हुआ सूरज मानव को भाप बनकर सोख गया। पत्थर पर लिखी हुई यह जली हुई छाया मानव की साखी है।
कितनी पुरानी कविता है प्रियंकर जी, और जितनी बार सुनते हैं उतनी बार अच्छी लगती है।
बिल्कुल। और
बहुत अच्छा।
दो कविताएं बहुत छोटी कविताएं हैं। एक कविता है सांप। सांप, तुम सभ्य तो नहीं हुए, नगर में बसना भी तुम्हें नहीं आया। एक बात पूछो, उत्तर दोगे, तब कैसे सीखा डसना, विष कहाँ पाया।
वाह वाह, बहुत अच्छा। हकीकत। बहुत
और
सुंदर।
एक बहुत छोटी कविता है जो
वाह।
सबाल्टर्न के बारे में आप कह सकते हैं कि उनकी क्या स्थिति है। थियरी में तो हम देखते ही हैं, आप इस कविता में देखिए कि अज्ञेय बहुत कम में कितनी बड़ी बात कहते हैं। कविता का शीर्षक है जो पुल बनाएंगे। दोज हू मेड ब्रिजेस। जो पुल बनाएंगे, जो पुल बनाएंगे वे अनिवार्यतः पीछे रह जाएंगे। जो पुल बनाएंगे वे अनिवार्यतः पीछे रह जाएंगे। सेनाएं हो जाएंगी पार, मारे जाएंगे रावण, जयी होंगे राम। पर जो निर्माता रहे वे इतिहास में बंदर कहलाएंगे।
वाह
वाह वाह वाह।
बहुत बहुत खूब।
बसंता, मुझे लगता है अब समय हो गया है।
हाँ,
और हम लोग अपने नेक्स्ट सेशन के लिए चलें।
Yes, आपकी it's amazing that this is the very first time when Priyankar ji has organized a great poet like Agyeya, given us a glimpse of it in such a short time. Very, very disciplined. If you all, I have been passing on this chapbook to every single one of you, and I do hope you have been able to read it. But you would know, if you have read, how important Priyankar Paliwal is to Srijan. He being in charge of Hindi poetry and propagating Hindi poetry in Calcutta, in Srijan, single-handedly, sort of. As you know, he has been born in the Ganga Yamuna basin, but his bringing up was in Shekhavati region, which is quite arid, and after that, studying there and being brought up there, he had come to Kolkata, and he has now made Kolkata his home. And He himself edits Darpan and Akshar, co-edits Samkalin Srijan. He's edited various other magazines like special numbers on Dharma, Atankavad or Azadi, Yatraon Ka Zikr, his travel writing, and he is the senior most known man in Srijan poetry, of course, but also in various other organizations. Even in taking part in Bangi Hindi Parishad. And of course, he proudly has commemorated the centenary of Mahatma Gandhi fundamental work, Hind Swaraj, and seminal Gandhi texts and critiques during the last 100 years. And now, of course, he heads language section in CSRI and has served as member core group publications of Mahatma Gandhi International Hindi University, Warda. But most of all, in Srijan, you will vote with me that he is one of the most popular of poetry lovers, poetry knowers, and poetry coordinators. Priyankar ji, thank you very much. And I do now hope that we have enough time on hand, so the poets who are there with us will be able to sort of manage a minute more, or even a little more than that. Julie, as you know from the chapbook again, I do hope that every time I mention the chapbook, and I send it so faithfully and so many times that you have looked across it. But our darling Julie is again in the PhD in English and South Asian Studies from the University of Toronto. And she had conceptualized and taught Central Studies and Diasporic Asian Poetry. She is the author of Dance of Life, Mythology, History and Politics of Cambodian Culture. She's the co-author along with her husband. I wonder if he's there. I can't see.
He's not here today.
So Harish is a co-author, and he's also a very, very literate, and the two of them make a perfect couple of love, romance, as well as of knowledge. To us in Srijan, right from coming to India in 2015, she has gifted us generously with immemorable moments, admiring poetry. And I personally am so grateful and thrilled that she has sat with me for hours, sifting through poets who have we have paid tribute to. Our intention of paying tribute is only this, and it is no more. That if we begin, we spend a whole month reading this new poet, like we have done this time, and a lot of things have happened within us which would have been impossible, never being able to discover a Ukrainian poet. Again, we have read so much and so frequently, but never knowing how beautiful his prison poetry was. That was so all these things happened to us, and Julie has been that person who has not just an academician, not just a teacher of English, but a lover of English, which is a very, very rare thing to happen. Julie, please conduct the proceedings now onwards. Thank you.
Basant, as usual, thank you so much, but you've overwhelmed me, and I'm still catching my breath. So Srijan's engine that drives us is, as you can see, Basant, unique. I was thinking last night when I was reading the chapbook, can you imagine the dedication, the devotion that goes into creating this chapbook with hardly any errors, month after month after month? I think what came through today to me, while we open the floor to our very own poets, is Shevchenko and Agyeya's voices that both Priyankarji and Basant brought out, intersected beautifully together in harmony. And the image of the sky which resonated with the idea of freedom, almost had me in tears, thinking of Rabi Thakur's beautiful song actually, which my mother sang to us, O Akash bol amare, Meghera tol pe de jaye kon deshe. The other song, which I think is a tougher one, is Shundoro bote tobo ongo dokhani, tarai tarai khuchito. Beautiful are you, dear sky, and your body is embossed and etched with stars. And these are the images in a strange way that come through in the first poet of our presentation this evening, Giri Pinto, Mumbai-based writer of poetry, prose, children's fiction, and he's a journalist as well. His noted works are Helen, The Life and Times of an H-Bomb, which won the Best Book on Cinema Award at the 54th National Film Awards, Surviving Women in 2000, and Asylum and Other Poems 2003. His first novel, M and the Big Whom, was published by Aleph in 2012 and won the Wyndham Campbell Award for Fiction managed by the Beinecke Library in Yale. The Sahitya Academy Award, the Crossword Prize, and the Hindu Lit Award for Life Award. His two books of poetry to his name, Asylum and I Want a Poem and Other Poems. He has also co-edited Confronting Love 2005, a book of contemporary Indian love poetry in English. He's translated many books from Marathi. Giri Pinto is at work on a third book of poems and a translation of the poems of Narayan Surve. So without further ado, the baton I hand over to you, Giri. We would be so happy to hear you. Go right ahead.
Thank you all, Julie, for that introduction. Thank you all for inviting me here. I'll read 2 or 3 short poems, and it is 8 o'clock now by my phone. So by 8:05, I promise I will have finished, and then we'll be happy to listen to some more poetry.
Thank you.
Yeah. This poem is called The Psychopathology of a Child's Drawing, and comes from the fact that we were all made to draw houses when we were in school, and those houses never looked like anything in which we had lived. The Psychopathology of a Child's Drawing. You did not draw a house, boy. You drew yourself. Your head keeps the cloud out and blots out the sun. Your roof is pointy, a triangle. Your thoughts will remain in the attic, boy, and gather dust. You are safe, tiled, tarred, and the last few feathers are drying under the eaves. Your eyes are windows. They are closed. Why close your eyes? You precious shit. Did you add curtains? That mouth is closed too. Your tongue comes slipping, sliding, slithering out into the world of utterance. Your house is two-dimensional. It has no room. It has no backstory. Yet smoke rises from the chimney. What burns? The second poem is the title poem, I Want a Poem. I want a poem. I want a poem like thick tropical rain, dense green spatter of syllables, drumbeat consonants, fertile with meaning, sudden, short, unforgettable. Afterwards, jungle silence. I want a poem like a Russian circus. You should know it has been trained. No ordinary everyday poem could leap like that. No quotidian poem could shimmer, spangle, exult like that. Oh, satin, yes, and yes, fakery, and then popcorn applause, and a lonely child, big-eyed, dreaming of running away to the poem. I want a poem like an animal. You should be able to eat it or domesticate it. You should be able to befriend it or behead it. You should carry it around or make it bear your burdens. You could, should, should clean up after it. Afterwards, skeleton poem rides in night terror through ice cream cloud cover. I want a poem. I want a poem. Instead, I get this poem. A poem of clanking wants, like a pile of bhandi bartan going over a waterfall in a barrel. A poem of whispering needs, like a tree whose branches scrape plea bargains from the pavement as it is dragged to the bonfire. I want a poem like a chorus of angels, a chamber of horrors, a blockbuster film, a sexcapade with candle wax, an anaconda adventure, a ride in a Batmobile, a Contessa in a fountain. I want a poem. Thank you all very much for your time.
Unbelievable, Jerry. Lovely.
Beautiful.
Lovely.
Jerry, do you have 2 seconds, or would you like to read another poem? I think we'd be ready for another one. It's so rich in imagery.
I'll do a short poem.
Yeah, sure.
Shall I do window because you talked about it?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, would be lovely. Thank you.
Window. What can you do with a window? It will always remain four-cornered, always be a savagery to the sky, always offer room enough for only one head or one cloud. There's nothing open about a window. Thank you again. Perfectly timed. I think it's now 8:05.
Perfectly. And Jerry, I must tell you, what happened with that poem of yours, Drawing Home, were I to draw my home, I don't think I would. It would be quite like this drawing of yours. And then you end it with saying, we might arrive at something between your version and mine. There is such a wonderful, an almost luminosity of hope that even though we disagree, at the end of it, we will find ways in which we can collaborate together. I think that's what is so interesting about your poetry. And the last one that you read, Chorus of Angels, then you talked about sexcapades, and you talked about the Anaconda adventure, all in one breath.
Isn't that what poetry does? That it gives us the possibility to live multiple lives in a breath, in a single, couplet, say, of a great poet. You can discover worlds that you've not inhabited.
Absolutely.
I think that's why we're all here.
Yeah. Totally, absolutely agree. And so richly done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jerry. So, Basant, is it possible for us to, for you to introduce the guest, very special guest we have, Sri Sitanshu Yashaschandra?
Yashaschandra, yes. It is thanks to a very close friend of mine who lives in Ahmedabad. We do have local poets in Gujarati in Calcutta, and we used to have them read also. But from the very beginning, because of the intonations in the Gujarati language, which is different completely from the Bengali, way of speaking, it had been very difficult for us to understand Gujarati. But Sitanshu Bhai is a gift which we cannot overlook, a gift from across the country, from Ahmedabad, from Shailesh. Shailesh was with us a little while ago, but I can't see him now. But I'm sure this recording will go to him or he will come back again. But Sitanshu Bhai, aap yahan hamare saath hain. It's a great honor. And you had told me that you would be returning from Surat in some, that 3-day conference there. And I would like to welcome him warmly.
Yes, excellent.
Because it is an honor for us that a poet who is the most eminent representative of contemporary Gujarati literature, such a celebrated poet and a playwright, a critical theorist, a translator, an academic, with his creative, critical, and academic work. Who has received so much wide acclaim, laureate with the very best of national awards like Saraswati Samman, the National Sahitya Academy Award, of course, but the Gujarat Gaurav Award, and many, many states of the country have conferred upon him their highest awards. It is we are so thrilled that a literature of such skill, a Fulbright scholar, a Ford Wast European Fellowship recipient, a doctorate in contemporary literature from USA, another doctorate in Indian poetics from Mumbai, who has worked as Vice Chancellor of Saurashtra University, UGC Emeritus Professor and National Lecturer, the Chief Editor of Encyclopedia of Indian Literature of Sahitya Academy. Such a beautiful book, so much, so ably produced. And teaching professor and chair of Gujarati at the MS University of Baroda, visiting professor of the Sorbonne University in Paris. And I'm so glad that our new poet from Paris is here with us, and she is live from Paris, and she'll carry back our love to Sorbonne University, the Loyola Marymount University, Los Angeles, and our dear Jadavpur University here, and countless collections of poetry, plays, and a number of translation of his works into almost all languages, and of course into English and Hindi and Bangla, and even close by at home into Marathi, published by Sahitya Academy, by Raza Foundation, and Rajkamal Prakashan, etc. And the most he remembers most fondly, and he says, I am now the president of Gujarati Sahitya Parishad, and I wondered what that was, so I googled it, and I found that this is one parishad of which Mahatma Gandhi himself had once been the president. Such a person. He's like, I'm somehow seeing another Shankuda in our presence, Shanku Ghosh. And I really welcome Sudharshree Bhai, and I wish you could make it easier for us to understand whatever you will read or whatever you will say. But I request Julie to give him an extra minute or two, please. Thank you.
With great pleasure, and I'm glad we have a very small connection with Loyola College. So welcome aboard. Please go right ahead.
Basantji, as I suddenly disappeared from the screen, I thought COVID had me. but because of your affection and because I'm with Srijan, so I escaped the Visarjan. And I think he's very happy to be. I remember, I also feel like in 1976, some of us traveled from Bengal to Bihar to Odisha for some 3 weeks with Shakti Chattopadhyay. And Shakti would suddenly disappear and go into some kind of, whenever we would travel a little bit forest or somewhere, and he would come back after half an hour. We would be all seated in that bus and all hot and uncomfortable. And he would come back and tell us, "Oh, I have brought you some fruits," which would be like wild berries or something like that. So that is Indian literature.
सितांशु भाई, मैं केवल बीच में आपका अनुमति लूंगा, क्योंकि शक्ति चट्टोपाध्याय को हम बहुत ही प्यार से चाहते हैं. हमारे जो बंगाली के यहाँ जो हमारे जो चीफ कोऑर्डिनेटर थे, बहुत शुरू में उन्होंने शक्ति की पहली किताब निकाली थी. और शक्ति चट्टोपाध्याय मेरे बर्थ प्लेस में उन्होंने बहुत समय गुजारा. वो उस समय बिहार था. बिहार में चाईबासा में मैं जन्मा था, और वहाँ वो बहुत उसकी कहानियां हैं चाईबासा को लेकर के. आई एम सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट, बट आई कुड नॉट होल्ड माय सेल्फ. अपने ऐसे आदमी की बात कर दी.
प्रियंकर जी को भी देख रहा हूँ तो अच्छा लगता है. तो बट again, can I take 5 minutes or so? What would be the time scheme? 5 minutes?
Yes,
Yeah.
for you I've been instructed by Basant to give you 6 minutes. So go ahead.
Great.
Yeah.
I'll take 4. So, I'll read one of my poems in a little while. But talking about poetry and talking about writers from all Indian languages is also poetry, is also creative. So Agyeya ji had come to Gujarat and he had traveled with some other Gujarati writers. I was not one of those, but he traveled from Sabarmati to Dwarika. This is very interesting, from Mohan to Mohan, so to say. But so this is how poetry connects past, present, and everything together. Binds us together. And I would also like to read uh, a poem from Kobzar from Shevchenko. I just came back from a seminar on silence, and here a great poem and how isolated he felt. It says, and the sky unwashed, and the drowsy waves, and along the coast far off, as if drunk, the reeds buckle without wind. This is strife. I'm going to be trapped for a long in this unlocked prison, wasteland at the edge of this monstrous sea, nauseated globe, speechless, shut up and bend as if alive in these steppe, the yellowing grass. It does not want to speak the truth, but there is no one else to ask. I think Kobzar, in his own time, captured crises of so very many different ages. Unlocked prison and yellowing grass of the steppes, infinite, and says it doesn't want to speak the truth. That is it. Who is willing to speak the truth today to us? And so he says, but there is no one else to ask. In whose hands do we place tomorrow of our country? The grass doesn't speak truth, but there is no one else to ask. So such things are there, and I think Shakti and Sunil and Madhavendra Bandyopadhyay and all my friends whom I remember from Bengal and so many others, Vidya Karandikar and so many other great poets from all over. So we share that. But let me read a short poem. The ocean. All of us know about Samudra Manthan, where the gods and the non-gods churn the sea and so on. Samudra Manthan. This has something to do with that. The ocean. I have seen the ocean as it was before gods and demons churned it plain. I have seen its waters in the light of ancient fires burning in it. Flames leaping forth from the mouth of the mythical mare of deep waters. Vadava is the mythical mare, from which comes Vadavanal. Fire and ice mingle into a single field. To burn up and to be drenched down is the same. And when I come out of the depth of the ocean, my palms hold no fistful pearls. I'm not a diver. I'm a poet. Whatever there is there in my eyes. So I think when I see my contemporary Indians and South Asians and Europeans and Americans and so on, there is so much in their eyes and there is nothing in their fists. empty. So that's kind of Hari Ghas Par Kshan Bhar, Agyeya ji wrote that. और हरी घास पर क्षण भर वही हम कर सकते हैं. क्षण भर ये हरी कब तक हरी रहेगी वो तो पता नहीं है. वो कभी भी इसी ही बात करता है कि the grass is pale in the steps. तो ये हमारी परिस्थिति है. लेकिन
जब तक आप लोगों की शब्दों की माला, आप तो उसकी बूंदें पड़ती रहेंगी, घास कभी कुम्हलाएगी नहीं. मैं तो इसमें कभी विश्वास नहीं कर सकता कि ऐसी घास कभी थोड़ी भी पीली हो सकती है. इम्पॉसिबल. शितांशु भाई, आप जरा गुजराती में भी कोई कविताएं पढ़ेंगे प्लीज.
अभी आप दोबारा मुझे बुलाइए तो, क्योंकि मुझे अपने साथी कवियों के समय की चोरी करना बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं है. तो ठीक, आप जरूर, मैं आऊंगा, गुजराती में भी पढ़ूंगा, लेकिन मेरा 4 मिनट 1 मिनट में ना दी है, नहीं 4 मिनट कंप्लीट हो गई है अभी.
Doesn't matter. You are, you have no holds barred. Go right ahead. One more, please.
एक तो गुजराती में होनी चाहिए.
एक तो गुजराती में होनी चाहिए. तो एक छोटी सी कविता है, लेकिन उसके साउंड की महिमा है. वो मृत्यु का एक सररियल एक्सपीरियंस है, लेकिन घोड़े और उसका चैरियट, उसके बारे में है. तो चैरियट्स है, वो चैरियट्स रॉक के है. तो रॉक का चैरियट है और घोड़े बड़े शैतान है. तो उसके दोनों के बीच की ये बात है. खरी पछाड़ी पुछ उछाड़ी दौड़या, काला डम्बर घोड़ा धोड़े खड़काड़े रत जोड़या. भड़क्या सामी छाती, अड़धा करू बंद जा कमाड़, धड़ 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 आवी सीधा अथड़ाया धाड़. पापण तोड़ी तोड़या खड़को, खोपड़ियों ने बुक्के ऊंडे आंख में ही जई पोड़े. सेड़ भेड़ भंगार पड़ो. Everything has been destroyed. It's ruins like in Europe. सेड़ भेड़ भंगार पड़ो, ત્યાં ગોળ ગોળ હું ફરું, મારી ને ઘોડાઓની ફાટેલી આંખે લળી ડોકિયા કરું. અંદરથી ત્યાં ક્યાં 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 ખરી પછાડી પુચ્છ ઉચાળી દોડ્યા, ધોળા ડમ્બર ઘોડા કાળે ખડકાળે નથી જોડ્યા.
वाह, बहुत बढ़िया.
Absolutely sterling. Loved your Samudra Manthan, Professor Sitanshu.
Yes.
Particularly nothing in their fists, but all in their eyes. I think that is something we'll take away from your reading. And the drowned Phoenician soldier from T.S. Eliot's poems come to mind a lot of the time. Thank you so much. That was just unforgettable, I think, for all of us.
Wonderful being with you all, really.
Thank you. So we'll go back to Bandana Mitra, looking greatly forward. Bandana Achuto.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Great. So you have a very interesting childhood. Your schooling was from Gammo Balika Shikshaloi, and you call it a traditional and enlightened institution.
Yeah.
And I think fate would have your interest in science and take priority. So you went to study metallurgy, and then the IIT Kharagpur took over. Then you joined a PSU in senior position and made you travel all across India. So your eyes took on a feast which got translated into your poems, which have been published in periodicals, magazines, websites, pretty much everywhere, that show your enchantment with the great Shankhogosh, Kalpurush ki Jagche, especially how poetry was an essential bread and water for our soul, an absolute necessity. You also have a collection of short stories, Chumkor blog, and you love traveling and photography. Looking greatly forward, Bandana, go right ahead. You have 5 minutes to Do whatever you wish with it.
Thank you so much. And I am privileged to be here with all of you and to be the witness of such a great evening with so many great poets. And my humble submission of 2 or 3 poetries within the specified, I think, time period. If I am going beyond it, please tell me. I won't take much time. Okay.
Take your time. Take your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So আমার প্রথম কবিতা মহাশ্বেতা। বসন্ত পঞ্চমী রাতে ব্যস্ত স্টেশনে দেখেছি বালিকাটিকে, দেখেছি আলোর নিচে এক মনে ঝুঁকে পড়া একাগ্র শরীর, খোলা বই, বাসি কাগজের কাটা খাতা, ভ্রুকুঞ্চিত উজ্জ্বল বাদামি মুখে পলাশ রেণুর মতো গুঁড়ো মাখা জ্ঞাপূর্বক শন প্রত্যয়। প্রত্যয় দেখেছি আমি অপুষ্ট চিবুকে তার, শক্ত পেন্সিল ধরা শীর্ণ হাতে, দেখেছি অদৃশ্য বীণা অনুপম মীর, কপালে আড়াল করা দেদীপ্য ত্রিনয়ন। বসন্ত পঞ্চমী তিথি শীতার্ত সন্ধ্যায় দেবীকে দেখেছি আমি, স্টেশনের ম্লান আলো মেখে সকরুণ জ্ঞান স্বরূপিণী। চলন্ত জানলা থেকে কৌতূহলে প্রশ্ন করি, কে তুমি, কি নাম তোমার? উচ্ছল কৌতুক স্বর দূর থেকে ভেসে আসে, সরস্বতী মুর্মু বটে। ধন্যবাদ। আমার দ্বিতীয় কবিতা পুরুষকাঠি। লেশ বুনে যাও, লেশ বুনে যাও, একটা সোজা দুটো উল্টো, কিংবা কিছু অন্য প্যাটার্ন, অন্য আকাশ, অন্য মাটি। শুনছো মেয়ে, তোমার হাতেই কুরুশ কাটি। লেশ বুনে যাও, লেশ বুনে যাও সহজ ছন্দে, দিঘির বুকে শালুক পাতা ভাসে যেমন আয়াসবিহীন, ভোরাই হাওয়ায় মায়াবী রং ছড়িয়ে পড়ে জলের দেহে, ঠিক তেমনটি একটির পর একটি ফোঁড়ে ফুটতে থাকা ইচ্ছে সুতোর শীতল পাঠি। শুনছো মেয়ে, তোমার হাতেই কুরুশ কাঠি। আমরা তোমায় শাসন করে আদর করে বলতে বসবো কিভাবে ঠিক সুতোর ফাঁকে সুতো জড়ায়, দীর্ঘ জটিল লতায় পাতায় নকশা তুলে হাজার দলে পাপড়ি মেলা পদ্ম জাজিম। আমরা তোমার 10 আঙুলকে বন্দি করে শেখাতে চাই ছকে ফেলা নিয়মিত কুরুশ বোনা। কিন্তু মেয়ে, নিজের মাটি আগলে রেখো, আমার কথায় কান দিও না। নিজের হাতে বুনতে হবে ইচ্ছে সুতোর শীতল পাটি, আঙুল তোমার, স্বপ্ন তোমার। শুনছো মেয়ে, তোমার হাতেই কুরুশ কাটি। নমস্কার। আর যদি সময় থাকে আমার শেষ কবিতা পড়বো কি?
হ্যাঁ, নিশ্চয়ই।
আচ্ছা, ধন্যবাদ। এই কবিতাটির নাম রাই। আপনাকে কাল দেখেছিলেন মাঠের ধারে কালো তমাল তলি। আসলে ওটা চৌরাস্তার বুড়ো অসৎ, ঠাট্টা করে আমরা অমন বলি। আপনার রঙের মতো কালো মেঘে মেঘলা সকাল আমাদের পাড়ার পথে ছড়িয়েছিল এদিক ওদিক। আপনার হাতে বাঁশি যেমন থাকে, পিতবাস ও শিখি পাখা, পদ্মপলাশ নাগর প্রেমিক। হাসবেন না, জানি ওসব বোকামের কল্পবিলাস। আসলে তো গাড়ির সিটে মোবাইলে 2 চোখ জোড়া, 4টিখানি কথা নাকি 16,000 না কত যেন বান্ধবীদের মেসেজ পড়া। কপাল ভালো, সিগনালে আজ লাল চক্ষু অনেকটাক্ষণ, এবং আমি লাইন দিয়ে অটো স্ট্যান্ডে লোকের ভিড়ে। আপনাকে আর 2 চোখ ভরে দেখবো বলে জানেন মশাই 3টে অটো ছেড়ে দিলাম মায়ের কিরে। আমি তখন ক্লাস, বাবা তখন কারখানাতে। ছাঁটাই হবার কমাস আগে রাগিনীতে বইটা এলো, 10-12 বার দেখেছিলেন। আপনার সেই তেরছা চাওয়া, শীষ দিয়ে গান, ঝাঁকড়া চুলে গিটার হাতে। প্রেমে পড়তে আর কি লাগে ওই বয়সে? তারপরে তো বাবার নেশা, মায়ের অসুখ, ভাই বোনেদের স্কুল ছুট, এবং আমার মাসাজ শপে চাকরি নেওয়া। যাকগে, এসব ফালতু কথায় আপনার আর কি যায় আসে? আপনাকে তো দেখতে পেলাম নিজের চোখে, আশ মিটিয়ে কয়েক মিনিট অপলকে অনিমিখা। গাড়ির কাছে আড়াল ছিল, চশমা ঢাকা বিরক্ত চোখ ব্যস্ত ফোনে। থাক না, তাতে আমার কি যায়? কেউ জানে না আজকে ওই কয়েক মিনিট ছিলাম আমি ব্রজভূমি শ্রী রাধিকা। নমস্কার।
बहुत बढ़िया, बहुत अच्छा।
দারুণ। বন্ধুরা, তুমি যে ফটোগ্রাফার আর তুমি যে ইমেজ পোয়েট, সেটা তোমার ছন্দতে, তোমার যেভাবে তুমি ক্রিয়েট করো ইমেজগুলো একসাথে, আমার তো মানে মনে হচ্ছে যে তুমি অনেক ডিফারেন্ট সাবজেক্টস নিয়ে লিখতে পারো, with so much humor and so much versatility. মহাশ্বেতায়, ফর ইনস্টেন্স, কয়েকটি অপূর্ব প্রতীক আছে। আর এই যে তোমার হাতেই কুশের কাছে, এটা উইমেন্স এম্পাওয়ারমেন্টের জন্য খুব সুন্দর। যেভাবে তুমি গড়েছো এক একটা ইমেজ, আর তার সঙ্গে একটার সঙ্গে যে ইন্টারকানেক্টেডনেস, the last piece of poetry was just brilliant. It had so much humor. যখন তুমি বলছো প্রেমে পড়তে আর কি লাগে, সত্যি খুব ভালো লাগলো। থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ। Now, and it is a great pleasure to present to you one of our great Hindi poets. Actually, he would come under the Urdu poet category. Ahmed Meraj wears many hats. After an MA in Urdu, he went on to earn a PhD and a B.Ed and is a teacher by profession. After his ghazals getting published in a number of periodicals of repute, his collection Share Junoon was very well received, and then the second book, Dur Ki Sada, collection of haiku, is now under publication. But he became a regularly invited to All Bengal and All India musharas for more than a dozen years. Many organized by Maulana Azad College as well as the West Bengal Urdu Academy. Also by respected literatures like the head of the Department of Urdu of Calcutta University, or by Insha in collaboration with ICCR, telecast live, mushairas also at the Muslim Institute, and by the WBMDFC held at Park Circus Maidan. So he is a voice that is well heard, and in addition to his poetry, he is also respected for his books on criticism, reviews, and interviews. He has written unaccountable articles, keen debater, and what is interesting to note is his interest in sports, including football, cricket, and athletics. And I believe he runs marathons. So without further ado, let's hear the voice of Ahmed Meraj. Go for it.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका, और मुझे बहुत खुशी हो रही है कि इतनी अजीम शख्सियतों के साथ, इतने महान लोगों के साथ मुझे बैठने का सौभाग्य हुआ। मेरी खुशबख्ती है। मैं सृजन के तमाम मेंबर्स का, आप तमाम लोगों का बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं कि इतने ग्रेट लोगों से मिलने का मौका मिला। चूँकि वक्त कम है तो मैं खुसूसन गज़ल का शायर हूं, तो मैं कुछ शेर आप लोगों की खिदमत में पेश करता हूं, और पढ़ने के दौरान मैं कोई गुफ्तगू नहीं करूंगा। आप बहुत पढ़े लिखे लोग हैं, आप लोगों को मैं सुन के पढ़ के बहुत कुछ सीखा हूं, इसलिए कोई गुफ्तगू नहीं। शेर देखिएगा कि हाथ फैलाए हुए सुबह मसा मैं भी हूँ, हाथ फैलाए हुए सुबह मसा मैं भी हूँ, ऐ खुदा सुन ले मेरी महवे दुआ मैं भी हूँ।
बहुत
और
अच्छी,
ये
बहुत
शेर
अच्छी।
देखिए कि मैं कभी तेरी तरह ओढ़ के गम रहता नहीं, मैं कभी तेरी तरह ओढ़ के गम रहता नहीं, जबकि अंदर से बहुत टूटा हुआ मैं भी हूँ,
ओ बहुत अच्छे, बहुत अच्छे।
जबकि अंदर से बहुत टूटा हुआ मैं भी हूँ। और ये शेर देखिए कि होता मिट्टी का मकान फूस का छप्पर होता, सर छुपाने के लिए अपना कोई घर होता, और देख लेता वो अगर झील सी आंखें तेरी देख लेता, वो अगर झील सी आंखें तेरी अपनी गहराई पे शर्मिंदा समुंदर होता।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर, बहुत
क्या
सुंदर।
बात।
अपनी अपनी गहराई पे शर्मिंदा समुंदर होता। और ये जो रिश्तों में जो करवाहट पैदा हो गई है, एक शेर देखिएगा कि जिसमें रहता हूं मैं वो घर तो मेरा है लेकिन, जिसमें रहता हूं मैं वो घर तो मेरा है लेकिन, काश रहने के लिए घर की तरह घर होता।
ओह,
वाह
बहुत सुंदर।
वाह, बहुत
बात,
खूब,
क्या
बहुत
बात।
खूब।
जिसमें रहता हूं मैं वो घर तो मेरा है लेकिन, काश रहने के लिए घर की तरह घर होता। और कुछ शेर और देखिए कि मेरी ये बहुत मशहूर ये गजल की एक झलक पाने का हर शख्स तमन्नाई है। एक झलक पाने का हर शख्स तमन्नाई है। दिल नशीं खूब तेरा जलवे ज़ेबाई है। और ये देखिए ये शेर के जब भी रोता हूँ अकेले में सुकून पाता हूँ। ये फील कीजिएगा सर कि जब भी रोता हूँ अकेले में सुकून पाता हूँ। मेरा गम बांटने वाली मेरी तन्हाई है।
बहुत
बात,
सुंदर,
क्या
बहुत
बात।
बहुत सुंदर।
खूब,
मेरा
बहुत खूब।
एक
मेरा जब भी रोता हूँ अकेले में सुकून पाता हूँ। मेरा गम बांटने वाली मेरी तन्हाई है। और बस यही सोच के 2 मिनट और मेरे पास है। बस यही सोच के मैं करता नहीं तेरा गिला। बस यही सोच के मैं करता नहीं तेरा गिला। तेरी रुसवाई में शामिल मेरी रुसवाई है।
क्या बात।
तेरी रुसवाई में शामिल मेरी रुसवाई है। और मैं खुसूसन यहाँ जो है ना जरीना जरीन मैम का शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ कि कम से कम इस खाकसार पे उनकी नज़र पड़ी। 2-3 शेर और मैं सुना देता हूँ सर और अपनी बात खत्म करता हूँ। देखिएगा सर कि रखते हैं दिल में इतनी मोहब्बत वतन से हम। रखते हैं दिल में इतनी मोहब्बत वतन से हम। लड़ते हैं सरहदों पे भी जख्मी बदन से हम।
बाप रे बाप।
लड़ते हैं सरहदों पे भी जख्मी बदन से हम। और देखिए कि जब हमको शेखे तंग नजर ने दुआ न दी। ये कॉम्युनल हार्मोनी का एक शेर देखिए सर कि जब हमको शेखे तंग नजर ने दुआ न दी, आशीर्वाद लेके चले बरहमन से हम।
क्या
ओ
बात, क्या
बहुत
बात,
खूब,
क्या
क्या
बात।
बात,
जब
बहुत
हमको
खूब।
शेखे तंग नजर ने दुआ न दी, आशीर्वाद लेके चले बरहमन से हम। और गजल में जो इश्क का जो कंसेप्ट है वो देखें सर एक शेर के तोहफा हमें मिला है ये फसले बहार का। तोहफा हमें मिला है ये फसले बहार का। आए हैं हो के खार बदामा चमन से हम।
ओह, बहुत सुंदर, बहुत
आए हैं
सुंदर। क्या बात
हो
है।
के खार बदामा चमन से हम। और इसका आखिरी शेर क्या है, दौरे शादमानी यानी खुशी के लम्हात। ए दौरे शादमानी अभी छेड़ मत हमें। ए दौरे शादमानी अभी छेड़ मत हमें। उलझे हुए हैं अरसए रंजो महन से हम। उलझे हुए हैं अरसए रंजो महन
रंजो
से हम।
महल में हम।
एक बार मैं तमाम हजरात का शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ और मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा। अब जब भी आप मुझे एक व्यूअर की हैसियत से भी मुझे आप लिंक भेज देंगे, मैं मुझे फख्र महसूस करूंगा। बहुत बहुत
बहुत
शुक्रिया।
अच्छा।
बहुत शुक्रिया,
थैंक
बहुत
यू।
बहुत खूब।
आपका
थैंक यू।
आपका एक लाइन मुझे दिल में बहुत लगा है, टूटा हुआ मैं भी हूँ। So this whole evening, all the poetry has been about broken lives. It started with Shevchenko's poetry, looking for freedom, identity. आप भी ये बहुत
हाँ
बहुत सुंदर से बताया. और if Zareen, are you here, Zarina? Would you like to say a few words?
जी, लेकिन मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा अहमद मिराज आगे जितना लिख रहे हैं उतना ज्यादा अच्छा लिख रहे हैं और मेरे दिल से दुआ निकलती है कि वो और ज्यादा अच्छा लिखें और अपनी बात लोगों के दिलों तक पहुंचाएं। बहुत बहुत मुबारक हो अहमद मिराज, शुक्रिया।
थैंक यू मैम, थैंक यू।
And Zarina, it's kudos to people such as you who encourage the kind of talent which we've heard from Dr. Ahmed Meraj today. It has really filled up our hearts, and I know that Basant is, he was really enjoying it, as were so many of us. So, moving on to somebody I met at Srijan, and she won my admiration hands on immediately. Sufia Khatoon. She is what we call a performance poet. She's an artist, a literary translator, and Sufia has authored 2 books of wonderful poetry. Death in the Holy Month, which was shortlisted for the Yuva Puraskar by Sahitya Academy 2020, and Germination, Red River publication, with won the Kavi Salam Award 2018. Her works have appeared in various periodicals and anthologies like Indian Literature Journal, Bangalore Review, Mad Swirl, and a whole heap of others. She's actually presented her poems in major festivals. Festival of Letters, Avishkar Young Writers Festival, Dibrugarh in 2019 by Sahitya Academy, APJ Kolkata Literary Festival 2019 to 20. A master's in English literature, a postgraduate in journalism and mass communication with a diploma in visual arts and design. She combines the genres of poetry and art, as we saw in the young Bandana Mitra as well. So you see, this is a kind of a trace of a new trailblazing where imagism is connected to words. Go ahead, Sufia, waiting to hear you.
बहुत शुक्रिया. So I wish it's like, I've been hearing and I actually get very emotional when I hear poems. So I'm like, that's why I'm very, very silent and I'm just listening to everyone. It gets overwhelming. You know how it is. When we used to meet and, Srijan meets used to happen, it was a charm. It was so much more. So I kind of miss all that. So this listening to everybody has been great. So I will read some poems from my recent book, Germination. I've illustrated the whole book and I hope you enjoy it. Okay. And I try to write as much as possible, but frankly speaking, during the pandemic, writing has been really hard. And somehow I've been able to complete the book, and thank you for having me as always, and keep me in your blessings. Means a lot to me. The pomegranate tree. My cousin Nishat and I picked some dried pomegranate flowers and sowed a city within its pollens, a city without conflicting tongues. I am constantly cleaning my hands that built this garden from barren concrete. It wants to be reborn into a moon on the edge, with asylums for those who never find homes. मैं आसमां से पूछती हूँ पता, मैं आसमां से पूछती हूँ पता सबाह के शहर का, मेरे हाथों में गिरा दो कुछ बूंदे चश्मे नूर की, मेरे हाथों पर गिरा दो बूंदे कुछ चश्मे नूर की, इन्हें करार मिल जाएगा. The exhaustion of loving a displaced body is only known to the swarming dragonflies. Sleep in me when you haven't found belonging in the isolation of your mind, fighting boundaries and the pandemic of the absurdity of hate. H-A-T-E, hate. 2. A blue dasher under the pomegranate tree skims the puddle of water shed from cleaning the world. Is it confessing love to its reflection, or is it the image of apocalypse I have memorized the anatomy of diseases consuming us all. Muezzin doesn't call for prayers anymore. The evening arati doesn't reach my garden anymore. Everything is disappearing. I inject perseverance in on the tree trunk that sometimes feels like an old cityscape on the brink of becoming obsolete. The first half-ripened pomegranate that Ammi plucked cracked in my anxious mouth and refuses to disperse. Survive, survive, survive. The clouds form and conform on my temple and the bridge of my eyes. The sky is beginning to breathe again. Thank you. And another poem to read from Witness. Again, I'd illustrated the whole book. So this is called Striking a Name. Because I have a lot of conflict when it comes to living with my existence, my identity as a Muslim woman, and the challenges that most women face nowadays. So it's kind of difficult for all of us.
Sufia, we would love to see a couple of your illustrations. If you want to hold up your book, that would be amazing.
So this is the book. The cover, it's basically inspired from the pomegranate tree in my garden. So it's all 50 poems based on that. So I illustrated it for 4 years, wrote poems for 2 years. It talks about, how I identify with the tree, and it becomes the metaphor for everything that I'm encountering as a poet. So
You are our own Shevchenko, I think.
Yes, Basant, absolutely.
I agree with you, Basant. You are nothing less. Absolutely.
striking a name. My name isn't a relief to my survival. Ironically, it's the opposite. I am searching the idea of striking a name, an identity, and building fearlessness into my vagina. When I'm haunted by the meaning of being a Muslim woman, withered purple shedding of morning glory skins my temple. It lacks the scent of my trust in your words. I am in the noise. 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 थोड़ा सा सोच को खामोश कर लो तुम. थोड़ा सा खुद को बासुकून होने दो. देखना बेवजह जिंदगी को कोई मकसद मिल जाएगा. The hanging clothesline across the makeshift house demands a day off. It has seen too much of life without ever moving. Some things are too loud in nature to find respite in my mind. I play along with the uncertainty of an absent existence. I walk around, I leave the idea of summer in the air, speaking of promises. I pluck out the tendrils, the mouth, the ego, the downs on the leaves, and the fragile innocence of a toddler, and filter them through the musk of aching evenings around my chin. It has been centuries of speaking through metaphors and sheltered identities. Thank you.
Absolutely blew us away. Thank you so much. Sufia, when we open for in-person meets, and I know Basant would also wait for that, Srijan was really a glorious place where so much creativity, and we are still doing it. I mean, thanks to
Absolutely, yes, that's cheers to Srijan.
Really
great, grateful to
Basant,
Srijan for it.
Yeah, Basant deserves unending applause. Thank you again.
Thank you.
No, again, Julie, it's not fair because there is Priyankar, there is Anjana.
There's
Of
everyone.
course,
staring
of
at
course,
me,
everyone. But
and
you
then,
are the engine
no,
that
not at
drives
all.
us, that allows us. Yes,
Not at
yes,
all,
yes,
not at all.
yes.
I just ride on top of them, and as they gather steam, I also gather steam. But it is they, the whole team on duty.
Everyone,
I mean,
everyone.
every single person. I'm
Yes.
actually just the rider on the train. The driver are these, actually, honestly. And I can't be at all exaggerating when I say that it is actually they are the team. I'm nothing in Srijan, absolutely nothing.
Okay, so moving on from the humble words of Basant, I'm looking for Bablu. Bablu Giri, are you around?
Bablu is not there.
Okay, so then let's move to Laltu. The name is a pet name. There is a better name, Harjinder Singh. Again, we have a smorgasbord of people here today who are academics, and Laltu actually has a PhD in chemistry from an MSc from Princeton. And after briefly teaching chemistry in Punjab University, he now is a professor at International Institute of Information Technology at Hyderabad. But he's a poem. He's a poet who writes poetry from the heart. His first poems were written in Kolkata in an environment for poetry that was, he says, an important part of Bengal's culture, which he imbibed. Now he has 10 collections of poetry under his belt, starting with Ek Jheel Thi Barf Ki Adhar in 1990, ending with 2 getting published last year, Hare Se Bhara Tha Uska Badan, as well as Kaun Dekhta Hai, Kaun Dikhta Hai, poems far from the glare of power and order, where life and living and poetry are but synonyms. How fascinating. What is special today is that, like our Ukrainian poet, Laltu's poems reflect an acute urge for democracy and honesty and an open commitment for the downtrodden. Collections of short stories, translations like that of Joseph Conrad's and of one of Srijan's tribute poets, Shukumar Rai's Abul Tabul, that he ingeniously titled as Agaram Bagaram. Also journalistic writings, articles, book reviews, and the popular blog Aiye Haath Uthai Hum Bhi, replete with, he says, musings, poetry, and issues of concern. So let's hear the multi-dimensional, multi-focused, multi-talented poet. Please go ahead, Laltu.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. If not,
Yes,
please
yes,
let me know.
you are.
अरे आपकी आवाज आ रही है.
मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि मैं एक ही नज़्म पढ़ूं और 3 ज़बानों में पढ़ूं. मूल कविता हिंदी में है. मैंने जल्दबाजी में बांग्ला और अंग्रेजी में उसका अनुवाद किया हुआ है, वो भी मैं पढ़ देता हूँ. छोटी कविता है, गद्य कविता है. It's a prose poem, and I have translated it in English. It may not be a great translation, but you may listen to it. The poem is titled Kolkata.
You are born and brought up in Princeton, sort of. And it's impossible that your translation in English will not be good.
Right. It's titled Kolkata. It was written about 10 years back, but the thoughts are from my college days. 10 साल हुए ये कविता मैंने लिखी है और ख्याल जो हैं वो कॉलेज के दिनों के. कोलकाता. रात के चौथे पहर वो मुझसे बतियाने आता है. थोड़ी देर बाद राम की घंटी सुनाई देती है. मैं आंखें खोल कमरे की छत पर छिपकली की तरह लटका उसे देखता हूँ. रेंगता हुआ वो मुझे छोड़कर चल देता है. हर रात कोई तोहफा मेरे लिए छोड़ जाता है. मसलन आज उसने ऑर्फनगंज मार्केट की कहानी रख दी. पढ़ते हुए मैं कीचड़ में छपाक सा फिसलता हूँ और मेरे घुटने कांप उठते हैं. ठीक उसी वक्त निताई भिखमंगा अपनी बीबी के बगल से उठकर सरकता हुआ मानसी का दिन भर का मैला बदन सूंघता है। अंधेरे में 36 नंबर ट्राम घंटी बजाते हुए खिदिरपुर आ पहुंचती है। मैंने उसे कभी डगमगाते नहीं देखा। उसकी चाल मुझे उस हिपस्टर की याद दिलाती है जिसका नाम न्यूयॉर्क है। सड़कें उसके कदमों के नीचे डगमगाती हैं। सुबह के थपेड़ों से पिटने से पहले ही मैं सो जाता हूँ। इसी बीच दुकानें उवासी लेती हुई हवाएं निगलती हैं। ऊपर उलझे हुए टेलीफोन के तार मेरे सपनों में जाग उठते हैं। कोलकाता अपने माथे से ओस की आखिरी बूंदें पोंछता है। कहीं कोई बादल अचानक नीचे उतरता सिर पर चांटा मार जाता है। वो फिर भी नहीं डगमगाता, हंसता भी नहीं। बस अगली रात मुझे कैसा तोहफा देना है सोचता हुआ गंगा की ओर चल देता है। ट्राम की घंटी को बसों गाड़ियों के घर घर आशिक घेर लेते हैं। उनकी ओर देखता वो एक बारगी कह उठता है, 10 साला आज भी इनकलाब मिलने नहीं आया। किसे मालूम कि क्वार्क किस चीज के बने हैं। রাতের শেষ প্রহরে সে আমার সাথে কথা বলতে আসে। একটু পরে ট্রামের ঘন্টা শোনা যায়। আমি চোখ খুলে দেখি ও ছাদে গিরগিটির মতো ঝুলে আছে। হামাগুড়ি দিয়ে আমাকে ছেড়ে চলে যায়। প্রতি রাত্রে সে আমার জন্য তোহফা রেখে দিয়ে যায়, যেমন আজ অরফানগঞ্জ মার্কেটের গল্প রেখে গেছে। আমি পড়ি আর ছপ করে কাদায় পিছলে পড়ে যাই। আমার হাঁটু কেঁপে ওঠে। ঠিক তখনই ভিখিরি নিতাই ওর বউয়ের পাশ থেকে উঠে হামাগুড়ি দিয়ে মানসীর সারাদিনের ময়লা গা শোঁকে। অন্ধকারে 36 নম্বর ট্রাম ঘন্টি বাজিয়ে খিদিরপুর এসে পৌঁছায়। আমি কখনো ওকে টলতে দেখিনি। ওর হাঁটা দেখে আমার মনে পড়ে সেই হিপস্টার যার নাম নিউইয়র্ক। ওর পায়ের তলায় সব রাস্তা টলমল করে। সকালের ঝাঁকানি আসার আগেই আমি ঘুমিয়ে পড়ি। ইতিমধ্যে সব দোকানগুলো হাই তুলে হাওয়া গেলে উপরে জটিয়ে থাকা টেলিফোনের তারগুলো আমার স্বপ্নে জেগে ওঠে। কলকাতা মাথা থেকে শিশিরের শেষ ফোঁটা মোছে। কোথায় যেন এক মেঘ হঠাৎ নিচে নেমে এসে মাথায় চাটি মেরে যায়। সে তবুও টলমল হয় না, হাসেও না। শুধু পরের রাতে আমাকে কি উপহার দেবে ভাবতে ভাবতে গঙ্গার দিকে চলে যায়। ট্রামের ঘন্টাকে বাস গাড়ির গরর গরর প্রেমিক সব ঘিরে ফেলে। ওদের দিকে তাকিয়ে সে একবার বলে ওঠে, যাস শালা, বিপ্লব আজও এলো না। কে জানে কোয়ার্কগুলো কি দিয়ে তৈরি। It comes to chat with me in the last phase of night. A little later, I hear the tram bells ringing. With eyes wide open, I see it hanging upside down from the ceiling like a lizard. It crawls away, leaving me behind. Every night, it leaves a present for me. For instance, today it left the story of the Orphanganj market. I read it and slip splashing in the mud, and my knees shiver. Right then, Nitai the beggar moves from his wife's side and slips away to breathe in Manasi's flesh, carrying the day-long filth. Number 36 tram arrives at Khidirpur in the dark, ringing its bells. I never saw it staggering. Its walk reminds me of the hipster called New York. The streets stagger beneath its feet. I fall asleep before the morning slaps me. In the meanwhile, shops yawn and breathe in the wind. My dreams are awake in the telephone cables in the sky. Kolkata wipes the last drops of dew from its forehead. A cloud droops down at some which where and hits him on the head. Yet it does not stagger. It does not smile either, merely walks away towards the Ganga, wondering what present it should bring me the next morning. The grr vehicles as lovers surround the tram bells. It looks at them and all of a sudden says, shit man, and today again the revolution did not turn up. Who knows what quarks are made of? Thank you.
बहुत बढ़िया।
অতি সুন্দর, অতি সুন্দর লালটু। আমি কোনোদিন ভুলবো না ওই লাইনটা, দুঃশালা বিপ্লব এখনো এলো না। Absolutely spot on, দারুণ। And you're obviously very fluid to move between languages, and 3 languages, all idiomatically on the money. Hats off to you. Really enjoyable. So would anybody like to, we can ask Priyankar ji, would you like to say a quick something on a response on Lalu ji?
लालटू भाई का मैं आदिकालीन प्रशंसक हूँ, बहुत पुराने समय से, और सिर्फ इसलिए नहीं कि वो कवि है, वो मनुष्य इतने शानदार है कि मैं क्या कहूँ। और 3 नहीं 4 भाषाएं, हिंदी, अंग्रेजी, बांग्ला, पंजाबी, चारों में उनका समान अधिकार है। और उनकी जो इन भाषाओं के बीच में जो आवाजाही है वो इतनी स्मूथ है, इतनी आसान है कि हम ये कह नहीं सकते कि तीनों भाषाओं में किस भाषा में वो कविता मूल कविता थी। सभी तीनों ही वो लग रहा था जैसे कि वो मौलिक कविताएं हैं। और वो विज्ञान पढ़ाते हैं, उन्होंने एक बहुत नामी विश्वविद्यालय से पीएचडी की है, प्रिंसटन से। ये तो महत्वपूर्ण है, इससे भी ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण है कि हिंदुस्तान में वैज्ञानिक चेतना के प्रसार के लिए वो इतना बड़ा काम कर रहे हैं, इतना लग के काम कर रहे हैं कि बहुत कम ऐसे प्रोफेसर मिलेंगे जो क्लास के बाहर भी इतना काम करते हैं। तो उस तमाम व्यस्तता के बीच उन्होंने आज समय निकाला, इतनी अच्छी अपनी एक कविता सुनाई, 3 भाषाओं में सुनाई। मैं उनके प्रति आभार व्यक्त करता हूं और ये उम्मीद करता हूं कि आगे कभी हम उनसे उनकी खूब सारी कविताएं सुनेंगे, ढेर सारी कविताएं। शुक्रिया।
Shukriya, Priyankar ji. Thank you, Laltu ji. That was a great pleasure and an honor to have you. Okay, I'm looking greatly forward to this young face in front of us, Shyamashri Ray Karmakar. So, Shyamashri has an interesting background. She was born in Kolkata and is a postgraduate in English literature as well as educational sciences. She's a teacher by profession. And what is intriguing is that of all the many publications of short stories, awards she has won, a book of poetry that intrigues me very much, Shyamashri, is titled Firoza Rangir Ghum. Another one, Bighal Horindrishya. Each of them is a widely acclaimed book of poetry, including Monokashtir Ghat. Is it Manokashtir Ghat or Monokashtir Ghat?
Monokashtir hobe.
Yes, because it's spelt differently here. And what I really am keen to see you talk about a little bit, maybe other than your poetry, is that you have translated into Bengali poems by Neruda, all right, but Dylan as well as Leonard Cohen, Neil Hall, Hanif Abdul Rakib, and so many other foreign poets. And you're now the editor-in-chief of the bilingual magazine, Shahitya Ekhon, and you have been a co-editor of journals like Prithibash Patrika, Bodh Patrika. So looking greatly forward, Shyamashri, and maybe you'd like to tell us how you got interested in writing poetry, very briefly.
Only I'll interrupt again. Shyamashri has stolen this last bit about the poets, about the singers being translated from our very own, very dear, darling Sumit Roy, who says to him his learning came from all of these names, and he calls them professors in inverted commas.
Yes, and Bob Dylan, as we know, is a Nobel Prize winner.
Absolutely.
So, and Cohen, Leonard Cohen is no less. We've all grown up with his poetry, and now University of Toronto, as you know, Sumit, has the best collection of his manuscripts. So when I'm back there, you come and look at Fisher Library. We have a deal. Okay, Shyamashri, go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me and letting me enjoy such a wonderful tapestry of poetry. It's an honor. And about Cohen and Dylan, I was mesmerized by their songs, and they were very much those songs were very much poetry to me, including music, including the beats, including the way they sang. Everything was poetry to me. So I I was compelled to translate them into Bengali because I thought that people should know much about them. People who don't listen to English music, they also should know what a rich poetry and what a rich heritage is there. His poetry is not just poetry, it is philosophy, I think.
Great, great. Thanks for that background, Shyamashri. Let's hear your poetry now. I think we're all agog to wait.
I'll read out small poems. প্রথম কবিতার নাম এই দ্রোহকাল। ক্যালেন্ডার লিখি নরনাগরী হরফে, 10 মাস যুদ্ধ চলে, 2 কাটে শোকে। গ্রামে গঞ্জে দেহ পড়ে যেন কাটা ধান, এ পৃথিবী রঙ্গালয়, লাশের দোকান। যাদের শৈশবে লেখা সুখা রুটি গালি, পুণ্যে পাপে হে মাতৃরূপেণ ধুলোবালি, তাদের জড়িয়ে থেকো খাদ্যাখাদ্যে খুনে, মানুষ ভুলের চর্যা বেধো নিজ গুণে। কেন বায় অন্নপূর্ণা কামাতিস সাথে, স্যামনে হলুদ মাখে কায় কল্প রাঁধে। এ জন্ম পুলিনে চলে যুদ্ধ নিরবধি, রক্তের গঙ্গায় ঢালি ইউকন নদী। আমারও তো মনে আছে এই দ্রোহকাল নিয়েই জন্মেছি আমি। কররেখা জাল আসলে তো প্রতি জন্মে ক্ষত ক্ষতিয়ান, যেজন ভুলিতে পারে সেই পুণ্যবান। দেবী আমাদের রেখো গন্ধরাজে প্রেমে, ধানে রেখো মানে রেখো নিকষিত হেমে। লড়াই রাস্তায় চলে যে লড়াই মনে, যে তার শক্তি দিয়েও প্রতিগৃহ কোণে।
बहुत बढ़िया।
I'm reading out another poetry poem from my book Dighal Horin Drishyo. কবিতার নাম পারলৌকিক। নদীর স্রোতের মুখে দাঁড়িয়েছে কেউ, মালসায় ভস্য রাখা নিভৃত আগুন। নদীর কিনারে যার চিতা জ্বলছে, সেই নিজের অস্থি হাতে, অশ্রুহীন চোখ। ভস্যের ভেতর তার নিজস্ব আগুনটুকু নিভছে না কিছুতেই, জ্বলন্ত নাভিটি। নিভে গেলে শান্ত মনে সে চলে যাবে, নতুন দিগন্ত খুঁজে জ্বলে উঠবে নতুন লুকথক। বহুদিন পরে মনে পড়বে এখানেই ছিল বাংলার ভাষা নামে একজন আহত যুবক। শেষ কবিতা। যুদ্ধ বলো না তুমি। তুমি যুদ্ধের কথা বললে আমার চোখে ছায়া ফেলে অসীম সবাক বালিয়াড়ি, একাগ্র পাহাড়ি ঢাল, অরণ্যের সংসারী গাছেরা। ইচ্ছে করে পৃথিবীর তাবৎ বিস্ফোরকে বকেয়া সেলাই দিয়ে জুড়ে দিই অস্ত প্রবণতা। কলকাতা শহরের নহুষ ট্রাম লাইন ধরে মন ও বাক্য কায়ে ভরে হাঁটতে হাঁটতে দেখি কিভ শহরের সব থিয়েটার হলের গায়ে শান্তি জল দিয়ে যাচ্ছে পুরোহিত মেঘ। ইউক্রেন তোমাকে আমি যেভাবে চিনতাম, কাশ্মীর তোমাকে আমি যেভাবে চিনতাম, বীরভূম তোমাকে আমি যেভাবে চিনতাম, সমস্ত চেনার ওপর এখন ভস্যের আস্তরণ। গ্রামের প্রাচীন মাঠে শহরের সদন্ত নেমে আসছে, বহুজাতিক ডাইনোসর গপ করে গিলে নিচ্ছে ছোট শহরের মুদিখানা। বন্ধু নামক কাঠের গোপন আগুন গন্ধ শুকতে শুকতে আমি টের পাচ্ছি সমর্পণ স্বল্পপত্র ধীর লয়ে ঝরে যাচ্ছে তাৎক্ষিক আগ্রাসন থেকে। নমস্কার।
দারুণ শ্যামশ্রী, এর কোনো জবাব নেই। আর তোমার দ্বিতীয় কবিতাটা শুনে আমার সত্যি একটা ভেতরে একটা এমন আলোড়ন হয় যে তুমি ইমেজেস যেরকম করে ভেবেছো, that a man who is dead and is dying is standing with his own ashes which will not stop burning. It's a tremendously unique kind of way at looking at humanity. Thank you for that. Thank you. Amader last offering, a Hindi poet, Mr. Vimlesh Tripathi, 1974 born. So once again, we have such a delightful bouquet of young poets and who was studying in his younger days in a remote village in West Bihar, and his poetry came to him early in the serene Ganga Valley. Moved to Kolkata during his postgraduate from Presidency College and a PhD on the poetry of Kedarnath Singh. And then his poetry flowered and got his stuff published in the best-selling list of Doinik Jagaran. His poetry collections, Hum Bache Rahenge, Ek Desh Aur Mare Hue Log, and Kandhe Par Kaviya, also his love poems, with his forthcoming collection, Ye Mera Dusra Janm Hai, eagerly awaited. Stories, novels, poems, all that, with a number of them awarded the Gyanpith Navlekhan Award in 2010, the Bharatiya Bhasha Parishad's Yuv Purashkar in 2014, and the Rajiv Gandhi Excellence Award in 2011. His other dimensions include acting in 4 films, storytelling, singing Bhojpuri songs. I'd love to hear that, of which he has 2 albums. Amazing. He works, and this is what fascinates many of us, to know that he works in a unit of the Department of Atomic Energy. What are you doing as a poet in the Department of Energy? But that's another story for another day. Vimlesh, let's hear your poems.
बहुत शुक्रिया। पहले तो थैंक यू, प्रियंकर दा ने मुझे आदेश दिया कि तुम्हें कविताएं पढ़नी है, और बसंत जी से मैं परिचित हूँ। इससे पहले भी मैं सृजन में कई बार मेरा आना जाना हुआ है और पढ़ना हुआ है। मैं 3 कविताएं पढ़ता हूँ। मुझे लगता है कि इतने नफरत भरे समय में प्रेम की बहुत ज़रूरत है, तो मैं 3 छोटी छोटी प्रेम कविताएं अपनी पढ़ता हूँ जो मेरे पहले संग्रह में शामिल है। पहली कविता का शीर्षक है हम बचे रहेंगे, जो कलेक्शन भी इसी नाम से है मेरा पहला। हम बचे रहेंगे। सब कुछ के रीत जाने के बाद भी माँ की आंखों में इंतजार का दर्शन बचा रहेगा। अटका रहेगा पिता के मन में अपना एक घर बना लेने का विश्वास, ढह रही पुरखों के हवेली के धरन की तरह।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर।
अटका रहेगा पिता के मन में अपना एक घर बना लेने का विश्वास, ढह रही पुरखों के हवेली के धरन की तरह। तुम्हारे हमारे नाम के इतिहास में गायब हो जाने के बाद भी पृथ्वी के गोल होने का मिथक उसकी सहन शक्ति की तरह ही बचा रहेगा, और हम बचे रहेंगे एक दूसरे के आसमान में आसमानी सतरंगों की तरह, और हम बचे रहेंगे एक दूसरे के आसमान में आसमानी सतरंगों की तरह। ये एक कविता है, और दूसरी एक छोटी सी कविता है, ईश्वर हो जाऊंगा। शब्दों में ही खोजूंगा और पाऊंगा तुम्हें।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर।
शब्दों में ही खोजूंगा और पाऊंगा तुम्हें। वर्ण वर्ण जोड़ कर गढ़ूंगा बिल्कुल तुम्हारे जितना सुंदर एक शब्द, और आत्मा की संपूर्ण शक्ति भर फूंक दूंगा निश्चल प्राण। जीवंत कर तुम्हें कवि हो जाऊंगा कि ईश्वर हो जाऊंगा।
वाह, क्या बात, क्या बात।
और एक कविता है, तीसरी और अंतिम कविता मैं पढ़ता हूँ। अर्थ विस्तार। कविता का शीर्षक है अर्थ विस्तार। जब हम प्यार कर रहे होते हैं तो ऐसा नहीं कि दुनिया बदल जाती है। जब हम प्यार कर रहे होते हैं तो ऐसा नहीं कि दुनिया बदल जाती, बस यही कि हमें जन्म देने वाली माँ के चेहरे की हंसी बदल जाती है। हमारे जन्म से ही
क्या
पिता के मन में दुबका रहा सपना बदल जाता है और घर में सुबह शाम गूंजने वाले मंत्रों के अर्थ बदल जाते हैं।
क्या बात, बहुत बढ़िया, बहुत बढ़िया।
बहुत शुक्रिया।
Beautiful.
ये
बहुत
कब की लिखी हुई है विमलेश जी?
ये मेरे पहले संग्रह की कविताएं हैं। ये संग्रह 2011 में छपा था, लेकिन ये कविताएं मुझे लग रहा है, मुझे जहां तक याद है, ये 2000 साल दो मतलब इस सदी की शुरुआत में लिखी, बिल्कुल शुरुआत में लिखी गई कविताएं हैं। ये 2001, 2, 3, 2003 इसके बीच की कविता।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत ही सुंदर।
बहुत शुक्रिया, बहुत शुक्रिया। और मैं तो तब से सुन रहा हूँ, श्यामाश्री हैं और सुप्रिया। मुझे बांग्ला कविताओं से बहुत प्यार है और लालटू जी ने जो कविता पढ़ी, अगर वो सुन रहे हैं तो वो कविता मुझे चाहिए उनसे, वो मुझे जरूर प्रोवाइड करें। मैं फेसबुक पर उनसे और प्रियंकर दा को बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहूँगा, जूली दी हैं। आप सभी को बहुत शुक्रिया। आपको बसंता दा एक बार फिर से बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
Thank you, everybody. It's been just an amazing experience anchoring this. Basant, thank you for asking me. It's been a pleasure.
It is so encouraging to find that so many, beautiful poets have all stayed on to listen to each other. Because I do remember one of the reasons we had formed Srijan was our experience with Bangla Academy, when there were a line of poets standing in the hall, and they asked each other about who is going to come next, and they would go out and come back and recite their poem and run out again. Contrast to that is our president Uma, who used to sit quietly, like even Shankar Ghosh. So many evenings, he just sit quietly in the back. Nobody would know that he is Shankada. And एक अजीब सी बात है विमलेश भाई कि कवियों में ऐसी कुछ है, ऐसा कुछ था, लेकिन हम सृजन में वो एक्सपीरियंस आज तक हमने नहीं किया। ऐसा कुछ था कि वो बस आते थे और कुछ पढ़ के भाग जाते थे, तो ये चीज नहीं है। और मैं Umane, she told me, not to sort of take time. So I would straight go on to our, as I call him, I don't have adjectives for Sumit. I just call him darling because he has done so much for Srijan. I mean, in all our anniversaries, he has provided the audio visuals. In many things, he guided us with how to conduct meetings. Even on this virtual meeting. And Shyamashri, you will be amazed that it was this year for music that Sumit got involved with us some 20 years ago, when we started a series in Srijan, which was called Homages to Rock Legends. And after that, we started another series, which was music from distant shores. All of your darling writers and singers, he calls as his professors. Bob Dylan, Lennon, Paul Simon, Cohen, Mercury, etc., etc. And to the extent that Naveen Kishore, another friend of ours, very good friend of ours, and Sumit had created India's first rock concert featuring just a single group, and that was the Seagull Empire. And that has now resulted in Naveen's superlative Seagull Publishing. I do not know we could go on indefinitely talking about Sumit, because we know so much of him and we love him so dearly. And what better way to express our thanks than through someone who we all really, really love. So every word coming from Sumit will be coming from all of us in Srijan. Sumit, please bring this evening to an end.
Thank you, Basant. I'm going to try and keep the thanks a little shorter than the introduction because we have gone on to time. I'm going to start by thanking our president for being with us throughout the evening. Umadi, your presence gives us a lot of encouragement and support. Thank you, Basant, for introducing us to Tarash Shevchenko, and Sujata for the AV that showed us how multifaceted the talent he was. Thank you, Priyankar Paliwal, for taking further your cause for Hindi poetry, presenting to us the atomic power of Agyeya's poetry, founder of Prayogbad and Nai Kavita. No doubt, I'm sure that his work will find space on your website, hindisamay.com. It was such a pleasure to have Gujarat's Gaurav, Sitanshu Yashaschandra or Sitanshu Mehta join us. And I know that these words of thanks will finally reach you because Basant is recording this. So thank you for churning our minds from estuary to estuary of flowing poems, and then taking us through those, the thundering hooves of words that brought a sculpture to life. Only poetry can do that. Yes, I'm going to thank all the poets of tonight for taking strings out of our lead poet, for strumming our heartstrings with your words. Jerry Pinto, our speaking tiger, may have drawn houses that did not look like houses, but words that certainly painted images, four corners of a window. In fact, I'm wanting to tell you about Four Corners, which is the production that we're doing tomorrow by the Red Curtain, but I'm going to complete this first. Bandana Mitra for her Saraswati Bandana with her words, well worth leaving a few autos to be able to fall in love with her words. Thank you, Bandana. Ahmed Meraj, aapko le kaan phailate hain for more of your shairs. Thank you, Zarina, for bringing us such talent from the world of Urdu poetry. Sufia Khatoon's performance poetry. All I can say is rhythm divine. Keep on writing, Sufia. Keep on presenting your work at forums like this. For Laltu Harjinder Singh, I'm going to ask the audience to respond, but I will try to say it in three languages. In theatre, this is how we applaud. So, haath uthaye hum bhi. Shagle haath uthan. Put your hands up and applauding Laltu. Thank you, Laltu. What a wonderfully fluent presentation that was. Shyamashri Ray Karmakar gave us an endless journey with her 5 minutes. What should I say? Like a bird on a wire, she spoke words that are still blowing in the wind for me. Vimlesh Tripathi, with poetry like this, amra beche thalbo. Thank you, Vimlesh. And now, thanks to the Srijan team, to Julie for orchestrating this evening so well, and Basant may be the rider on the train, but he's so careful to lay the tracks first for all of us so that we can all go through to our destination, worshipping creativity. I'm going to end now with the word of thanks. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your encouraging faces, because as poets, what we love to hear is words that resonate with hearts.
And the last word, please come again. We will send you the link now every time, but please do come again. But the last Saturday is a sort of a fixed date for us. So maybe you could click it off your calendar list. Thank you very, very much, and a very, very good evening, and stay well. Thank you.